how did I come up with the princess tales, which were the most fun to write? Well, I reread fairy tales. It started, The Fairy's Mistake was the first one, and it started with, it started as a picture book that nobody would publish. And then, after Ella was published, I sent my picture books to my editor, and she liked that one, and she asked me to turn it into a chapter book. But it's based on, how many of you know the fairy tale Toads and Diamonds? Okay. The star. Anyway, Toads and Diamonds, there are two sisters, and one is ugly and mean, and the other is pretty and sweet, naturally. And the mother is ugly and mean, and she loves the ugly and mean daughter, and they both hate the pretty and sweet sister, and so they make the pretty sweet sister do all the work. And they send the pretty sweet sister off to the well to get water, and an old lady is there disguised as a fairy. And the old lady fairy says, "Would you get me some water?" And the sweet sister says, "Yes, grandmother," and gives her water, and she rewards her by making flowers and jewels come out of her mouth. She goes home and says something, and the mean ugly sister and the mean ugly mother see the jewels, and she says, "I got it at the well. I think the old lady was a fairy." And so the mean sister goes to the well so she can have jewels coming out of her mouth. But the fairy, who wasn't so stupid, turned herself into a beautiful young woman at that point, and when she asks for water, the mean sister says, "I'm looking for an old lady, get your own water." So she makes snakes and toads come out of the ugly sister's mouth. And the sweet sister is sitting and being sweet and pretty when a prince gallops along, and he falls in love with her sweet prettiness and decides that the jewels can be her dowry, and on the spot he asks her to marry him, and she says yes, and they gallop off together, and even the mean mother gets sick of her mean daughter with the toads and the snakes coming out of her mouth and kicks her out. So that's the original story. But it occurred to me, and you know this already, it occurred to me that I didn't really think that the prince was going to fall in love with her sweet prettiness. I thought he would fall in love with something else. What do you think he really fell in love with? Yes, he falls in love with the jewels. And so she is one exploited princess. And that's where the story came out of, because I thought, he's not going to fall in love with that. And she goes with him. She's not really in love with him either. But her mother and her sister are so miserable that it seems to her like it's going to be better to get out of there. And then she has to deal with it. So that's the part about getting to be a stronger person, because she has to deal with it. Well, one is coming out next year, and I'm working on a second one, but I'm very lost, and I hope I can get it. For a mystery, I wrote about 135 pages, but I forgot that I had to include any suspects. So I've gone way, way, way back. So that's what I'm working on. Well, Wilma in The Wish is a lot like me. Solly is, in Dave at Night, is connected to that friend with Steatopygus. Dave is my father. So there are a bunch of characters. Mandy in Ella Enchanted is my favorite in that book.
You kind of remind me of that.
Oh, thank you. That's a great compliment. Where did I go to school, and did it affect my writing? Okay, well now I'm going to tell you a sad story.
Okay.
I went to school, I grew up in New York City, and I went to college at Antioch College in Ohio, and then I transferred to City College in New York, and I graduated from there. And I majored in philosophy, which is not a good major for writing. But the sad story is that in high school, I didn't know I could be a writer. It never occurred to me. I never met a living author. But I took creative writing in high school. And a few years ago, I found my folder from that year. And at the beginning of my folder, my teacher wrote very nice things on top of the page about my writing. And then I came to a story. And he wrote, this is Mr. Pashkin, he wrote on the top of it, "You know your problem, you're pedestrian." Now, what does pedestrian mean? Somebody tell me what pedestrian means.
Common.
Plodding. Common. Yes.
Did he mean that you were on the side of the story, that you were putting yourself into it?
He wrote, "You know your problem, you are pedestrian." That's all he wrote. So what pedestrian means is kind of boring, ordinary, and he didn't say your story is pedestrian, which would have been not so difficult to bear, but he said I was. And I believed him. And I was so ashamed I couldn't ask him what he meant. And I didn't write for 25 years. So that's how my schooling affected my writing. Not positively in that, at least that instance. But writers need criticism. We need specific criticism. We need the kind of criticism that says, I don't understand what happened here. How did this character get from this spot to that spot? Or why is this stubborn person changing character suddenly? That kind of stuff we need in order to improve.